"Get out of here right now. You're not welcome in this place. Security, throw her out." The manager's voice cracked like thunder, reverberating through the luxury car showroom as though a bomb had gone off. His face was beet red, veins bulging in his neck as he screamed at the casually dressed black woman. The tension in the air was so thick you could slice it with a knife. This was Kevin Mitchell, and he had completely lost his cool. Customers froze. Staff stood slack-jawed. And the woman under fire? She remained utterly still, her composure so cold it sent shivers through the room. Her name was Olivia, and she responded with a voice sharp as ice. "You have no idea what you've just done." She didn't shout, she didn't panic. Her restrained fury was more terrifying than any tantrum. In that moment it was clear a line had been crossed. It was a Saturday morning at Elite Motors, nestled in the glitzy heart of Beverly Hills, and everything had seemed perfect. Golden sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, dancing off the mirror-like white marble floor. Supercars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Bentleys stood gleaming like gallery pieces, each one a six-figure masterpiece. Then Kevin Mitchell's furious roar tore through the calm. His face flushed, the blue veins in his neck protruding as though his anger had been bottled up for years. "Get her out of here! She has no right to be in this showroom. Security, escort her out now!" His command echoed across the opulent space, each word landing like a hammer blow. Salespeople, mid-pitch, froze in place, their expressions frozen in disbelief. Customers fell silent, all eyes fixed on the unassuming woman at the center of the storm. The air grew heavy. Everyone braced for her reaction, an outcry, a rebuttal, at least a flare of indignation. But she remained eerily calm, and that calm seemed to rile Kevin even more. Olivia Brooks. She stood tall, back straight, eyes locked on Kevin with a cold intensity. She wore a faded gray tee, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers, a stark contrast to the showroom's polished luxury. Yet there was an undeniable authority about her, a power that had nothing to do with wealth or status. Softly, but unmistakably, she said, "You have no idea what you've done." Just 7 words, yet they hung in the air like a death knell. She didn't need volume to command attention. Her quiet precision was enough to send ripples of unease through every onlooker. Kevin blinked, thrown off for a moment, then sneered, as if he were dismissing a bug at his feet. He turned to the approaching guard. "Take her out, now, and don't let her bother my clients." The guard stepped forward, face impassive, accustomed to handling scenes like this. He grabbed Olivia's arm roughly, intent on dragging her away. "I'll walk out on my own," Olivia said, her tone icy. She yanked her arm free with a strength that caught him off guard, reclaiming her dignity. The showroom fell silent as she strode toward the exit, each step like a scene from a high-tension film with no clear ending. At the front door, she paused, turning back to look at Kevin through the glass. Then, for the first time, she offered a small, chilling smile, not of warmth, but of warning, a promise that consequences were coming, and coming fast. She pushed the door open and walked out, leaving behind a showroom enveloped in oppressive silence. Kevin folded his arms, trying to mask the flicker of dread in his eyes, but his hand trembled beneath his expensive suit. Staff and customers exchanged uneasy glances, each wondering what had just happened, and what would come next. One thing was certain, the woman they'd just ejected was anything but ordinary. Kevin forced a shaky grin and addressed the stunned crowd. "Sorry for the interruption, folks. Please carry on with your tour." But deep down, he sensed he'd unleashed a storm far beyond a petty dispute, a ticking time bomb set to detonate with consequences he couldn't begin to imagine. As the glass doors of Elite Motors' showroom gently closed behind Olivia, her figure melted into the throngs of pedestrians on Beverly Hills' most upscale boulevard. Only then did Kevin Mitchell finally loosen the taut muscles in his shoulders. He strode back to the reception desk, forcing an air of calm, though his heart still hammered from the shock of what had just transpired. Kevin Mitchell, 38, had served as Elite Motors' general manager for nearly 5 years. In that time, he'd taken great pride in building an exclusive atmosphere tailored to the elite of this wealthy enclave. To Kevin, every client who walked through those doors had to be truly deserving. That mindset had led him, on more than one occasion, to turn away customers he judged unfit, whether due to their casual attire, their modest older vehicles, or simply their lack of the outward trappings of wealth. Kevin never saw any of this as racial bias or class prejudice. He convinced himself that it was merely an effective business strategy to safeguard the dealership's luxury image. But deep down, he knew he carried an unshakable prejudice of his own. That arrogance blinded him to the warning signs that had grown harder to ignore. Subtle complaints from people of color about being dismissed, whispered rumors among Beverly Hills social circles about a car dealership that judged customers by their appearance and skin tone. Meanwhile, Olivia Brooks hurried toward the battered Honda Civic parked a few blocks away. At 42, she was the quiet powerhouse behind Brooks Automotive, one of America's premier luxury car groups. Raised in Detroit, she'd cut her teeth in her uncle's modest repair garage and understood better than anyone the value of self-respect, fairness, and treating every customer with dignity, no matter who they were or where they came from. Acquiring Elite Motors in Beverly Hills was the crown jewel in her portfolio of a dozen dealerships. It represented the pinnacle of her success, but also her greatest worry. Olivia believed that every triumph carried hidden risks, and beneath Elite Motors' gleaming facade lurked a dangerous threat: the attitudes and actions of its staff, those very employees entrusted with upholding the reputation she'd spent 2 decades building. Lately, she'd been flagged by loyal clients, including some Hollywood luminaries, who quietly lamented subtle slights and discriminatory treatment at that dealership. These grievances never made headlines, yet they festered like an invisible virus, slowly eroding Brooks Automotive's prestige. Determined to see for herself, Olivia had gone undercover as an ordinary buyer, blending nearly invisibly into the stream of everyday patrons, precisely the kind of people the staff expected to dismiss. Only by experiencing their perspective could she grasp the full severity of the problem. Settling into the Civic's driver's seat, Olivia noticed her hands still trembling slightly. But it wasn't fear or weakness. It was the suppressed rage of someone whose dignity had been insulted, and whose conviction in fairness burned fiercely. She sat in silence for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Elite Motors' grand windows. She replayed Kevin Mitchell's haughty glare and the condescending tone he'd used to eject her from a dealership she now owned. She knew Kevin was far from an exception. That same arrogance likely pervaded many others she'd relied on to safeguard her brand. They must reflect the company's core values, Olivia reminded herself. It was people like Kevin, proud, prejudiced, who posed the greatest threat to the empire she'd built with sweat and sacrifice. She could not let this stand for another moment. Pulling her phone from her jacket pocket, Olivia scrolled to a name in her contacts: Emily Parker, her longtime assistant and most trusted confidant. Taking a steadying breath, she tapped call. Emily's voice chimed on the first ring. "Olivia, are you okay?" Olivia's tone was cold and resolute. "No, I'm not. Those rumors were real, Emily. Elite Motors has a far bigger problem than we ever imagined." A brief pause, Then Emily replied, her voice edged with concern. "What do you want to do next?" Olivia stared resolutely at the dealership, her words crisp as ice. "Prepare everything. I'm going to teach them a lesson they'll never forget about the cost of disrespect and discrimination. It's time Elite Motors learned what real justice looks like." The call ended. Olivia fired up the battered Honda and eased back onto the main road. From a distance, Elite Motors still gleamed like a jewel in the California sun, but to Olivia, that sparkle had lost its allure. Now it served only as a stark reminder of the urgent mission ahead, a battle to defend the principles of fairness and humanity she'd spent her life building. The old Honda Civic rolled to a stop in the lot, set well back from Elite Motors' main entrance. Olivia cut the engine, leaned forward in her seat, and stared intently at the showroom. Its lights glittered like diamonds against the night sky. She knew this undercover decision carried huge risks. If Elite Motors, the crown jewel of her empire, harbored a culture of discrimination, the fallout wouldn't just cost her money. It would damage a reputation she'd spent her entire life building. That evening, Olivia headed straight to her bedroom and flung open the massive wardrobe filled with expensive designer suits and shoes that would take the average person a year's salary to afford. She scanned them quickly, then paused at the final compartment. The few worn-out pieces she'd kept from years ago, a reminder of her humble beginnings. She pulled out a pair of faded jeans, frayed at the knees, a simple gray t-shirt, and an old pair of sneakers. As she changed, she became someone else entirely. Not the powerful CEO, but an ordinary woman, easy to overlook in a crowd. Standing before the mirror, she studied this new reflection. Beneath the plain clothes stood Olivia Brooks, who'd once worked 14-hour days in her uncle's Detroit garage to chase her dreams. She understood that to grasp whatever harsh reality awaited her at Elite Motors, she had to fully embody this role. An unsigned, unremarkable customer, simply seeking fair treatment. The next afternoon, Olivia drove the battered Civic into Elite Motors' lot. As she stepped out, she felt the curious, suspicious gazes of the guards posted outside the gleaming showroom. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and tension as she crossed the threshold. No sooner had she entered than she noticed the stark shift in the sales staff's behavior. Olivia paused by a polished Bentley Continental, ostensibly admiring it, but her real focus was on the representatives. They glanced at her, then swiftly looked away, as if she didn't exist. 1 minute passed. 2. 3. Not a single salesperson approached or offered even a polite greeting. Silently, she made her way to the reception desk, where a young woman named Megan was absorbed in her computer screen. Megan looked about 26, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and immaculate nails. She fit right into the luxurious surroundings. Olivia stood directly in front of her, yet Megan didn't bother to look up. After nearly a minute of icy silence, Megan finally glanced up, her expression dripping with disdain. Without a greeting, she snapped, "If you're here to apply for a job, go to our website. This isn't a recruiting office." The barb pierced Olivia's pride, but she remained composed. "I'm here to look at cars, not apply for work. Could you please send a salesperson over?" Megan sneered at Olivia's worn clothes and scuffed sneakers. "The cheapest car here starts at $40,000. You might want to try the used car lot down the street." Olivia drew a steady breath, fighting off the sting of humiliation. Before she could respond, Kevin Mitchell appeared, his usual smug grin firmly in place. He'd noticed her the moment she walked in and had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to assert his authority. Stepping forward, he fixed her with a cool, challenging stare. "I think you're in the wrong place. We only serve serious customers with verified purchasing power. Would you kindly leave?" Olivia's calm exterior never wavered, but her eyes turned steely. "I'm just interested in looking at some of your luxury sedans." Kevin laughed, the mockery clear in his voice. "Those cars are reserved for customers whose finances we've already approved. I'm afraid they're not for you." The showroom air grew thick, and nearby patrons began to notice the unusual exchange. Olivia held Kevin's gaze for a moment, challenging his arrogance with unwavering resolve. "So, you're refusing me service based solely on my appearance?" Kevin's confident smirk barely flickered. "That's right. I don't believe you qualify to view the cars here. We have genuine clients to serve, and I won't waste any more time." Olivia stood silently for a beat, then turned on her heel and walked out. At the door, she drew in a sharp breath, her pulse racing with anger, her expression as cold as steel. "Now I see exactly where the problem lies," she murmured, clutching the old Honda key in her hand. In that moment, Olivia realized she hadn't just exposed the prejudice of a few staff members or a single manager. She'd uncovered something far deeper, a flawed, toxic system quietly eating away from within. And she understood that her real battle was only just beginning. Elite Motors would pay dearly for the blatant discrimination they'd dared to show. When the glass door slammed shut behind her, Olivia spun around and peered through the transparent wall into the Elite Motors showroom, her heart tightening with a mix of fury and heartbreak. Something deep inside her quivered, not only from the personal insult, but from the stark realization of how alarming the situation had become at the dealership she had just acquired. Before entering Elite Motors, Olivia had steeled herself for a chilly reception or polite indifference from the staff. But what she'd witnessed was far worse. It wasn't merely a shrug at her simple attire, but a brazen, calculated contempt from the receptionist and senior management, people who should have embodied professionalism, courtesy, and genuine care. Standing outside, Olivia replayed Megan's every gesture and glance. Megan wasn't just a well-groomed young receptionist whose every detail, perfectly manicured nails, golden curls, designer sheath, reinforced the dealership's luxury image. She was the living emblem of the warped values secretly championed at Elite Motors. Seated behind that elegant desk, Megan had scanned Olivia with cold blue eyes, judged her by her faded t-shirt and scuffed sneakers, and concluded in a single, disdainful phrase. "If you want to apply for a job, go online. This isn't the place for that." That blunt dismissal wound around Olivia's pride like a whip. It wasn't just personal prejudice. It was a symptom of a system that tolerated arrogance and discrimination based purely on appearance. Megan's expression, unyielding, unapologetic, spoke volumes. She truly believed she was protecting the dealership's class. Then there was Kevin Mitchell, the impeccably dressed manager in his tailored suit and sleek, combed-back hair. Kevin personified the type who measured customers by their outward trappings and sorted them into worthy and unworthy. In front of Olivia, he'd explicitly told her she lacked the financial credentials to view the showroom's high-end sedans, and ordered her to leave so as not to waste his time. Peering back through the glass, Olivia saw that Megan and Kevin weren't isolated offenders, but the very face of a dangerous culture, one that was quietly eroding the core values Brooks Automotive held sacred: respect, equality, and trust. She had spent nearly 20 years building her brand on those principles, yet here, in one of her most important dealerships, they were being trampled by her own employees. And she knew this was no mere lapse in customer service. It was a deep ethical rot. Left unchecked, it would spread, killing the reputation she had worked so hard to forge. Lost in these grim thoughts, Olivia caught sight of another customer entering Elite Motors. A white man in an expensive suit, his luxury watch glinting under the showroom lights. Immediately, Megan rose from her seat with a welcoming smile, her demeanor transformed into polished professionalism. Olivia watched that stark contrast and felt her blood boil. In that instant, the painful truth she'd long suspected was laid bare. Treatment here hinged entirely on skin color and outward appearance. The very staff she'd entrusted with her dealership were discriminating without shame. Olivia clenched the old car key in her hand, her eyes steeled with resolve. She would not allow this to continue for another moment. Simple training sessions or internal reprimands would not suffice. A bold, decisive action was required, not only to reform Elite Motors but to broadcast a clear message throughout Brooks Automotive. Anyone who dared demean a customer, no matter who they were or how they looked, would face the most severe consequences. For Olivia, fairness and respect were absolute, and she would never tolerate anyone who challenged them. Witnessing Megan's instant warmth toward the new, impeccably dressed customer, Olivia felt a smoldering fire of outrage ignite in her chest. Determined to expose just how serious the problem was, she calmly stepped back into the Elite Motors showroom. The soft thud of her worn sneakers on the gleaming marble floor contrasted harshly and ironically with the cold, opulent surroundings. Kevin Mitchell spotted her the moment she re-entered. He furrowed his brow, a flash of discomfort and curiosity crossing his face at her refusal to give up. With his perfectly slicked-back brown hair and a tailored gray suit hugging his tall frame, Kevin strode confidently toward Olivia. He prided himself on being the perfect ambassador for Elite Motors' luxury brand. Polished appearance, refined speech, and above all, the knack for recognizing truly valuable clients. But that confidence had curdled into arrogance, even a dictatorial, prejudiced disdain for anyone he deemed unworthy. Stopping a few paces from Olivia, Kevin surveyed her from head to toe with blatant contempt. He drawled, as though granting her a special concession. "I thought we made ourselves clear. These cars carry hefty price tags, not for anyone who simply wants to window shop." Olivia stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I want to see that BMW sedan. I'm a customer, and I believe I have every right to." Kevin let out a short, mocking laugh, glancing at Megan and then at the other sales staff as if to assert his absolute dominance. "If you really want to see it, please provide proof of your financial credentials before we continue." The showroom fell into a tense hush. Employees and customers alike turned their full attention to the bizarre standoff between Kevin and the plainly dressed woman he was bent on denying. Olivia forced her voice to stay calm, even as her anger surged. "You're asking for financial documentation just so I can look at a car?" Kevin shrugged, smug and unyielding. "That's right. At Elite Motors, we have strict policies to ensure we only serve qualified clients." Olivia stared into his cold eyes, feeling the deep-seated arrogance and prejudice radiate from him. She realized he was trying to shame her into leaving, all in the name of protecting the prestige he so jealously guarded. But Olivia wouldn't back down. She stood her ground and declared firmly, "I just want to see that BMW. That's a basic right for any customer here." Impatience flickered across Kevin's face. He snapped his fingers at the guard nearby, his voice now laced with authority and wounded ego. "Security, escort this woman out immediately. I won't tolerate anyone disturbing our important clientele." The guard approached, his expression void of empathy. Without a word, he grabbed Olivia's arm and began to pull her away. The rough touch of a stranger's hand jolted Olivia, reviving painful memories of her younger self, fighting daily to preserve her dignity in a world rife with injustice and bias. Kevin watched with a self-satisfied grin, as though he'd just protected his luxury domain from an unworthy intruder. A few bystanders saw Olivia being led out like a criminal, yet none intervened. They simply turned away. Before she was forced through the door, Olivia paused, met Kevin's gaze, and issued a chilling warning. "You're making a grave mistake, Kevin." He only smirked, dismissing her warning, convinced he'd upheld Elite Motors' reputation. He had no idea that his actions had just become the emblem of the toxic, discriminatory culture festering within the dealership. Outside, Olivia stepped into the cool afternoon air. Her skin still burned with anger as she drew in a deep breath. Her thoughts laser-focused on one mission: to expose and eradicate the poison at Elite Motors. Inside the dealership, Kevin returned to business as usual, greeting wealthy customers with his practiced smile. Little did he know that, from that very moment, his life had entered a turbulent new chapter, one where his own prejudice and arrogance would spark a spectacular downfall. Just as Olivia stepped down the few stone steps leading out of Elite Motors, a gleaming black luxury sedan pulled up directly in front of the showroom windows. The man who emerged was the very image of the kind of client Kevin Mitchell coveted: a flawlessly tailored Italian suit, a gold Rolex glinting in the sunlight, and polished leather shoes that shone like mirrors. He strode confidently into the showroom as if he belonged there. From her vantage point in the lot, Olivia watched Megan's face light up as though someone had just flipped a switch. The same receptionist who had brusquely dismissed her a moment ago sprang to her feet, her smile instantly bright and warm. Megan rushed forward to greet the newcomer with an enthusiasm and professionalism that bordered on theatrical. "Welcome back to Elite Motors, sir. Would you like a coffee, or perhaps a glass of champagne while you browse?" Megan purred, her tone nothing like the cold contempt Olivia had endured. Olivia stood silently, cataloging every gesture and glance from the staff inside. The guard who had so roughly seized her arm just moments before was now deferential, bowing his head respectfully as he held the door wide for the well-heeled gentleman. And Kevin Mitchell, whose face had been etched with irritation and haughty disdain when he confronted Olivia, had transformed into the perfect gentleman, his demeanor eager and almost reverent. He hurried over, extended a polished hand to shake the new customers, and greeted him with a radiant smile as if he'd never treated anyone unkindly in his life. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Kevin Mitchell, the general manager. Are you interested in any particular model today, or would you like me to show you our newest arrivals?" The distinguished client nodded curtly and replied in a smooth, confident tone that matched his opulent appearance. "I'm in the market for the latest luxury sedan from BMW or Mercedes." Without missing a beat, Kevin turned to Megan and signaled her to prepare the drinks, then beckoned another salesperson over. "Andrew, please bring Mr. Thompson the latest BMW and Mercedes catalogs right away." Olivia's heart pounded as she watched the scene unfold like a vivid film. It was painfully clear. Her own treatment hadn't been an isolated misunderstanding or a careless mistake by one employee. It was a symptom of a deeply ingrained, systemic bias woven into Elite Motors' daily operations. Kevin Mitchell and his team weren't merely choosing customers by the look of their wallets. They were openly discriminating based on skin color and social status, with no fear of repercussion. Olivia realized this was not a personal affront, but a grave ethical failing, a perversion of the very values she had built Brooks Automotive on. Taking a slow, calming breath, Olivia steadied the anger smoldering inside her. What she had just witnessed was more than any CEO committed to fairness and respect could tolerate for another day. Clenching the old Honda key in her hand, her gaze hardened with resolve. She knew she had no choice but to act decisively and comprehensively, not only to correct Elite Motors' failings, but to send a clear message throughout Brooks Automotive. Any act of discrimination or contempt toward a customer, regardless of their appearance or background, would come with the harshest consequences. For Olivia, no success was worth sacrificing basic human dignity and respect. Before slipping into her Honda Civic, Olivia cast one last look at the showroom's glittering facade. Its opulence now struck her as hollow. She understood that a difficult battle lay ahead to restore true fairness and value to her dealership, but it was one she would never back down from. As Olivia's Civic rolled out of the parking lot, Elite Motors remained standing there, gleaming and confident, completely unaware that the storm they had ignited was gathering strength on the horizon, ready to sweep away all that was false and empty within. As the old Honda Civic pulled out of Elite Motors' lot, Olivia glanced in her rearview mirror, her eyes lingering for a moment on the showroom's fading glamour and arrogance. In her heart, a grave decision had just been made, one she'd hoped she'd never have to use. She reached for her phone on the passenger seat and quickly typed a brief message to Emily Parker, her most trusted assistant of nearly 10 years. The text was simple, but carried tremendous weight. Situation worse than expected. Activate Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was no ordinary contingency plan. It was the highest-level crisis response, designed for emergencies that threatened Brooks Automotive's reputation and core values. As she hit send, Olivia knew this meant an uncompromising, forceful intervention, a tsunami powerful enough to wash away everything in its path. Next, she dialed Thomas Reynolds, her West Region director and one of her most reliable senior managers. With nearly 2 decades overseeing high-end dealerships, Thomas understood the pressures and responsibilities of leadership. He was known for being firm but fair, always putting customer respect first. After just a few rings, Thomas's calm, assured voice came through. "Hello, Olivia. I'm listening." Olivia wasted no time. Her tone was cold and steely. "Thomas, we have a critical situation at the Beverly Hills Elite Motors. I've seen it firsthand, and it's far worse than we thought." Thomas hesitated briefly. He knew Olivia didn't invoke Protocol 7 lightly. He'd weathered plenty of crises, and this was serious. "Understood," he replied gravely. "I'll initiate Protocol 7 immediately and prepare our intervention steps." Olivia took a deep breath to steady herself. "Thomas, I need you at Elite Motors within 45 minutes. This isn't just an internal fix. We need to send a clear message across the entire organization that any form of customer discrimination will be eradicated. I'll join you there, and this time, I'll be there as Brooks Automotive's CEO." Without a moment's hesitation, Thomas affirmed, "I'll see you there on the dot." The call ended abruptly. Olivia set her phone down and stared ahead at the road. Kevin Mitchell's disdainful glare and Megan's two-faced behavior, welcoming the wealthy gentleman but coldly dismissing her, still burned in her mind. She realized that Kevin and his kind weren't isolated bad actors. They symbolized a deep-seated, systemic problem that threatened the very reputation and values she'd spent her life building. She remembered her company's early days, when every sale was about more than profit. It was about honesty and respect. She couldn't allow those sacred principles to be eroded at her flagship dealership. No matter how harsh today's decisions might seem, they were necessary to protect the fundamental ethos she'd always championed. As she drove back to the office to prepare for her return, Olivia thought of Kevin Mitchell, confidently holding court in the showroom, completely unaware that his life and career were about to be upended in under an hour. He believed his polished appearance, arrogant attitude, and high-end clientele made him untouchable. But Kevin Mitchell didn't realize that by openly discriminating, he'd made himself the target of Brooks Automotive's most sweeping purge ever. Olivia knew that once Protocol 7 kicked in, Kevin would face a reality of his own making. And so, Olivia braced herself for the battle ahead. A battle not just to right the wrongs at one dealership, but to send a powerful message to everyone under the Brooks Automotive umbrella. Anyone who loses sight of respect and fairness for customers, even once, has no place in this company. The old Civic rolled steadily onward, but in Olivia's mind only one thing mattered. She was ready to return to Elite Motors. Not as a dismissed undercover shopper, but as a decisive, powerful CEO determined to expose and eliminate every failing Kevin Mitchell and his team had revealed. Less than an hour after that fateful phone call, the glass doors of the Elite Motors showroom slid open again. But this time, every eye in the room gravitated toward the woman stepping inside. Someone entirely different from the casually dressed woman who'd been shown the door not long ago. Olivia entered under the showroom's brilliant lights in a flawlessly tailored navy blue women's suit. Her hair was swept up in a sleek knot, and her expression radiated cold authority and strength. With each confident click of her expensive heels on the polished marble, the room seemed to hush. Kevin Mitchell was in the middle of a conversation with the wealthy client he'd been attending when he heard those deliberate footsteps. He turned, a flicker of surprise, and just a hint of embarrassment, crossing his face as he took in the commanding presence before him. But his ingrained arrogance quickly resurfaced. He assumed she must be another potential buyer, and gave her the customary practiced smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Kevin said smoothly, stepping forward. "Welcome to Elite Motors. I'm Kevin Mitchell, the showroom manager. How can I help you today?" Olivia met his gaze without a word. The chill in her eyes unsettled him for a fraction of a second, but he brushed it off and continued in his self-assured tone. "We just received our latest BMW and Mercedes models. I'm sure you'll find something you love. Anything in particular you're looking for?" Still silent, Olivia's eyes never left Kevin's face. His smile faltered. He frowned slightly, losing patience. "Excuse me, but I think you'll need to tell me your financing credentials or at least your specific intentions so I can assist properly. We only serve serious buyers." At the height of the tension, the glass doors burst open once more. Thomas Reynolds, the powerful regional director, rushed in, his face etched with urgency. His gaze swept the showroom until it landed squarely on Olivia. The moment he saw her, Thomas went pale. He hurried over and came to a respectful halt before her, bowing his head. His voice trembled with surprise. "Madam Brooks, I didn't realize you were here." His words seemed to suck the air out of the room. Every employee, Megan, the guard at the door, the other sales staff, froze, eyes wide with barely concealed fear. Kevin stood statue still, his face drained of color. He struggled to process the two words, Madam Brooks. Then the pieces clicked into place. Olivia Brooks, the powerful CEO of Brooks Automotive, whom he'd only ever heard about in board meetings and company bulletins, was standing right in front of him, her gaze as sharp as a blade. Kevin felt the room spin. He couldn't muster so much as a word. His throat felt parched with dread. Olivia turned to Thomas, her voice calm but ice cold. "Thomas, you couldn't have arrived at a better time. I've just witnessed a very serious incident here. We need to discuss it immediately." Still visibly shaken, Thomas nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Brooks, I'm ready." Olivia's eyes swept the showroom one last time, landing on Kevin, who remained rooted to the spot. Her voice rang out clear and commanding for everyone to hear. "Moments ago, right here at Elite Motors, I was refused service and escorted out solely because of my appearance. Thomas, I want an explanation of your customer service standards. How can your staff treat clients this way based on looks alone?" Thomas bowed his head even lower, his voice quavering. "I am truly sorry, Mrs. Brooks. I promise we will address and rectify this immediately." Meanwhile, Kevin Mitchell, the man who had always prided himself on recognizing genuine customers, had lost all composure. The arrogance and self-satisfaction that once defined his expression were replaced by raw, palpable fear. And so, Elite Motors, once brimming with pride and confidence, fell into a heavy, breathless silence. Every employee and customer felt it. A monumental change was unfolding, and today would mark an unforgettable turning point for both the dealership and Kevin Mitchell's future. The atmosphere in the Elite Motors showroom turned thick and stifling, as if every breath of air had been sucked away the moment Thomas Reynolds spoke. All eyes fixed on Olivia as she calmly reached into her tailored jacket and withdrew a simple yet elegant business card. Setting it gently on the glass table in front of Kevin Mitchell, the soft click resonated louder than any shout. "I am Olivia Brooks," she said deliberately, each word measured and authoritative, yet never losing its inherent elegance. "CEO of Brooks Automotive. I own all 12 dealerships, including this one." In that instant, the usual buzz of luxury and commerce fell utterly silent. Salespeople, Megan at reception, the security guard, every staff member froze, their faces draining of color as they realized the terrible mistake they had just made. Megan, the haughty young receptionist who had coldly refused Olivia barely an hour ago, stood paralyzed. Her confident, sharp expression melted into panic. Her hands trembled, eyes wide with horror. She had never imagined her discriminatory dismissal would be directed at the very CEO of the company. Now she understood that her career and her future hung by a thread. And Kevin Mitchell, who had prided himself on judging clients by appearance alone, simply stood there dumbfounded. His eyes bulged, his mouth parted in a silent gasp. He stared at the business card, unwilling to accept the dreadful truth. Inside him churned despair and fear. He knew his arrogant, discriminatory behavior would be punished this time with no escape. Olivia held Kevin's gaze, her eyes cold but composed. Her voice rang out like a final verdict. "1 hour ago, I walked into this dealership in simple clothes and an old car, and I was treated like someone unworthy to set foot here, by the very people I trusted to represent this brand. I witnessed blatant discrimination that Brooks Automotive must never tolerate." Kevin remained speechless. His hand shook uncontrollably, cold sweat beating at his temple. Any excuses or explanations were now meaningless. Olivia was no mere difficult customer. She was the one who determined Kevin's fate and that of every employee present. Turning to Thomas Reynolds, who still bowed respectfully, Olivia continued with quiet intensity. "Thomas, I want you to immediately review and investigate every customer report from the past 6 months at this location. I need to know how long this has been happening, how many clients were mistreated, and who is directly responsible for fostering this toxic culture." Thomas straightened, voice trembling but resolute. "Yes, Mrs. Brooks. I will personally oversee this investigation and ensure every detail is uncovered immediately." Olivia gave a slight nod, then addressed Kevin one last time, her words crisp and unwavering. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't know how long you've managed here, but evidently you've forgotten our company's most fundamental value, treating every customer with respect and equality. Your discriminatory actions against a client have not only harmed me personally, but severely damaged the reputation I've spent nearly 20 years building." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle, then concluded firmly. "I cannot tolerate anyone who undermines the principles we stand for. Effective immediately, you are no longer the manager of Elite Motors. Thomas, see to it that this decision is enforced at once." In that moment, Kevin stood as though condemned to his doom. His eyes filled with hopelessness as he realized the empire he'd built on arrogance and bias had collapsed. For the first time, he felt the true consequences of his own hubris. The showroom remained frozen in that heavy silence. No one dared speak. They all recognized that this was more than Olivia's personal decree. It was a powerful declaration of Brooks Automotive's core principles. Anyone who disrespects a customer, even once, has no place in this company. Olivia paused, surveying the stunned faces around her. As she turned to leave, she knew this was just the first step in the most sweeping reform Brooks Automotive had ever seen. And for Kevin and his trembling colleagues, today would be a lesson they would never forget. No sooner had Olivia turned to approach Thomas Reynolds to discuss the next steps than Kevin Mitchell's trembling voice broke the silence. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by raw desperation, something he had never felt in all his years as a powerful showroom manager. "Mrs. Brooks, I really didn't know it was you. Please give me a chance to explain. This was just an unfortunate misunderstanding." Olivia paused and slowly turned back to face him. Her eyes were icy and piercing, as though she could see straight to the core of the pleading man before her. "A misunderstanding?" she repeated deliberately, each word sharp as a blade. "You're saying that if you'd known I was the CEO, you'd have treated me differently? That only proves the problem here. You judge people by their appearance and social standing, Kevin, and that is something I will never tolerate in this company." Kevin fell utterly silent. The bitter truth Olivia had laid bare erased every feeble excuse he might have offered. His head dropped, shoulders slumping under the crushing weight of his own self-inflicted sentence. Olivia then turned her gaze to Megan, the young receptionist who had stood just yards away. Megan's face had gone ashen, her wide eyes filled with fear. Olivia spoke calmly but firmly. "Megan, you were the first person here to greet a customer, but instead of welcoming them, you flat-out refused service because you deemed them not luxurious enough. I wonder how many other customers you've treated the same way." Megan remained motionless, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Olivia continued, allowing no room for excuses. "People like you have no business representing Brooks Automotive. I will not allow my company to tolerate contempt or discrimination toward anyone. You are no longer employed here." Megan stood frozen, realizing that her once promising career at one of Beverly Hills' most prestigious dealerships had ended with a single sentence. Her earlier arrogance and confidence had evaporated, leaving only bitter regret. Next, Olivia turned to the security guard, John Walker, who had quietly witnessed the entire exchange outside the door. John Walker, typically composed and authoritative, now looked completely shaken. Olivia's voice was stern. "John, your job is to protect customers, not to drag them out like criminals. Today, you grabbed my arm and acted aggressively toward someone solely because of how they looked. That is unacceptable at Brooks Automotive. You too are no longer employed here." John bowed his head, eyes full of disappointment. He had never imagined that following a manager's orders would become the gravest mistake of his life. He said nothing. He knew in that moment that no explanation would absolve him. Finally, Olivia returned her gaze to Kevin, her tone dropping to a resonant, almost judicial cadence. "I want everyone here to understand that in this company, there will never be a second chance for racial bias or customer discrimination. As of now, Kevin Mitchell, Megan, and John Walker hold no position within our organization." The lavish showroom felt frozen in time. The three former employees, once so confident in their roles and authority, stood motionless, their faces pale and eyes hollow. In that moment, they grasped the brutal cost of their blind prejudice. An entire career shattered in an instant. Thomas Reynolds remained respectfully by Olivia's side, silent but fully aware that Olivia's decisive actions were absolutely warranted. He knew this was not just a punishment for 3 individuals, but a powerful message to every employee at Brooks Automotive. This company will never condone any form of customer contempt or discrimination, however small. Olivia finally turned to Thomas, nodding once to affirm her decision. Thomas, ensure this is carried out immediately. Also, schedule an emergency meeting with all Elite Motors staff. They need to understand the culture we stand for and the values this company upholds. Thomas's reply was immediate and resolute. Yes, Mrs. Brooks, I will arrange it right away. With that, Olivia gave a final nod and exited the showroom with unmistakable authority. Her figure faded beyond the glass doors, but the impact of her powerful decisions lingered indelibly in everyone's mind. Standing amid the silent luxury, Kevin Mitchell, Megan, and John Walker had no choice but to accept the bitter truth. They had paid an unthinkable price for their arrogance and prejudice. All their former glamour and pride lay in ruins, leaving them with a lesson they would never forget: the devastating consequences of betraying respect and fairness. The moment Olivia exited the showroom, a tense, suffocating silence fell over Elite Motors. Kevin Mitchell, Megan, and John Walker slipped away quietly, leaving behind stunned, fearful looks from the other employees. That moment marked not just the end for those 3 individuals, but served as a powerful wake-up call for the entire Brooks Automotive organization. Less than 24 hours later, Olivia returned to the dealership, this time not to punish, but to usher in a new chapter for Elite Motors. She walked into the showroom alongside Thomas Reynolds, her expression serious and resolute. Every employee, from salespeople to technicians, had gathered in the main lobby, their anxiety palpable. Standing before them, Olivia's gaze was no longer icy, but firm and sincere. She spoke clearly, slowly, with unwavering determination. Yesterday's events weren't isolated incidents involving 1 or 2 people. They were the result of a toxic culture that took root right here, and that culture has no place in the values Brooks Automotive champions. She paused to let her words sink in, then continued with greater strength, as if turning the page for everyone present. Effective immediately, we are launching a comprehensive cultural transformation at Elite Motors. No employee may discriminate against or judge a customer based on appearance, skin color, or any factor other than respect and fairness. Thomas stepped forward, his tone respectful yet forceful. As directed by Mrs. Brooks, every staff member at Elite Motors will participate in an extensive, mandatory diversity and inclusion training program. This will not be a one-off seminar, but a long-term, ongoing commitment to reshape our attitudes and daily practices. He looked around the room, ensuring everyone grasped the gravity of the message. I want you all to understand that diversity is not just a slogan. It's a survival principle for this company. Anyone who fails to uphold this principle will have no place in our system. Olivia then announced a crucial change to their hiring and performance review processes. From now on, our hiring criteria will be overhauled. We won't evaluate candidates solely on appearance, qualifications, or sales experience. We will place honesty, fairness, and respectful conduct at the top of our checklist. Every customer who walks through our doors should feel welcomed and treated equally, no matter who they are or what they look like. Her eyes softened slightly as she detailed further reforms. I've also asked Thomas to reassess our entire customer service protocol. From today forward, every interaction with a customer will be closely monitored and evaluated to ensure no one ever endures discrimination again. The staff listened in respectful silence, recognizing that this wasn't a threat but a pledge from a CEO who genuinely cared. Many realized that this was more than merely disciplining a few individuals. It was the start of a profound cultural rebirth, one where fairness and inclusivity are celebrated. Olivia closed her remarks with a heartfelt, encouraging tone. I know change is challenging, but it's absolutely necessary. If we all commit fully to these principles, Brooks Automotive will not only remain a leading luxury brand, but will become an industry icon for respect and equity. Immediately after her speech, Thomas began rolling out the training plan. Top experts in corporate culture and racial equity were brought in to lead workshops, discussions, and practical customer service exercises. No one at the dealership could opt out or treat these sessions lightly. Simultaneously, the new hiring process was put into effect. Candidates now face scenario-based assessments and behavioral interviews to gauge their ability to handle sensitive situations with empathy and respect. Only those who truly embody the values Olivia championed will earn a place at Elite Motors. Within days, the cultural overhaul produced visible improvements. Employees became more attentive and courteous to every customer, regardless of background, attire, or vehicle. Loyal clients immediately noticed the positive shift and spread glowing feedback, beginning to restore the trust Olivia had labored to build. From her office, Olivia watched these small but significant changes with relief. She knew the transformation was only starting, but her resolve and consistency would be the driving forces to help Elite Motors rise from its mistakes and forge a hopeful new future, one in which every customer is met with genuine respect, fairness, and dignity. As the employees of Elite Motors began returning to their duties, gradually settling into the new, reformed atmosphere, Olivia stood quietly, watching them. Just before she left the dealership, her gaze paused on a corner of the showroom where Chloe, a young black customer, stood alone, her expression full of hesitation and doubt. Olivia immediately recognized the hurt in her eyes, because that was exactly how she had felt only hours before. Stepping gently toward Chloe, Olivia's look was soft and sincere. When Chloe noticed her approach, she startled, confusion washing over her youthful face. She had no idea how to react to this powerful woman who had just silenced the entire showroom with her decisive authority. Olivia spoke first, her voice stripped of corporate authority and replaced by genuine empathy. I'm so sorry for what you went through today. I know how awful that feels because I just experienced it myself. Chloe blinked in surprise at the unexpected warmth of Olivia's words. She looked up, gratitude and understanding shining in her eyes. I didn't realize you'd gone through the same thing. Thank you for stepping in and handling it, she managed. Olivia offered a gentle smile and laid a comforting hand on Chloe's shoulder. I want to make it up to you for the insult you suffered. I know you're interested in that BMW sedan out there. We're offering you a very special discount as a sincere apology, from me and from everyone at Brooks Automotive. I hope it helps you feel respected and valued. Chloe stood speechless, hardly believing what she'd just heard. Hope flickered in her eyes as the sting of yesterday's humiliation gave way to genuine warmth at Olivia's heartfelt gesture. I really don't know what to say, except thank you. You've shown me that fairness still exists here. Olivia nodded firmly. Fairness and respect should never be luxuries. They're responsibilities we uphold every day, especially here at Elite Motors. Turning to address the assembled staff, many of whom had watched the exchange, Olivia raised her voice so that every word carried through the showroom. Judge people by their character, not by their appearance. That is our core value and the very identity of this company. And I promise you, from this moment on, Elite Motors will never lose sight of that sacred principle again. Her words resonated throughout the room, and the employees felt their true weight. In the wake of recent events, Brooks Automotive had recommitted itself to its fundamental values: fairness, compassion, and respect for all. Olivia departed amid the respectful nods and genuine admiration of the staff. Her stride remained confident and purposeful, but inside she felt a profound sense of relief. Today marked the turning point for Elite Motors, a fresh beginning filled with promise. Outside, Kevin Mitchell, Megan, and John Walker stood on the curb, silently watching as Olivia walked away to the respect and gratitude of employees and customers alike. Their careers and futures had been abruptly sacrificed, as a direct consequence of the very prejudices and blind spots they once took for granted. Only now did they fully appreciate that this painful lesson was more than punishment. It was a profound wake-up call about the true meaning of respect and human dignity. As Olivia's car rolled away, she felt calm and relieved. She knew challenges still lay ahead, but today justice and fairness had been restored. The values she spent her life building were safe again. Behind her, Elite Motors, once wounded by discrimination, was beginning to thrive with renewed confidence in a future where respect, diversity, and fairness are always upheld. That was Olivia's greatest victory. Not merely personal, but a triumph for the highest ideals of humanity. If you've ever witnessed or experienced something similar, share your story and thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story and its message meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread these positive values. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.